Northern Ireland, some sun comes through, but it stays grey and overcast for Western England and Wales with some dampness around. The southeast, however, feeling humid with temperatures reaching 28 to 30 Celsius, whilst it's low to mid-20s elsewhere. Now, any rain tends to peter out through the evening. There'll be further showers coming through for northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well. In between, a lot of cloud covers the map, and that cloud's still with us on Wednesday with some outbreaks of rain, but Thursday and Friday turn drier and brighter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Our English Lionesses roared to victory last night, 56 years after England last won a major trophy with the World Cup in 1966. We'll be joining in the celebrations between now and 4 o'clock. In politics, ballot papers have begun to drop on Tory members' doormats. One of the latest on the race for number 10 is Liz Truss. Seems to have the momentum at the moment. Is she now unstoppable? We'll be speaking to the polling expert, Sir John Curtis, about what he reckons and what the polls are saying. We'll also be live in Northern Ireland on the day of Lord Trimble's funeral. He played, of course, a major part in bringing peace to Northern Ireland through the Good Friday Agreement. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson being there together today as well. And Hanover in Germany becomes the first major European city to turn off hot water and heating in public buildings. We'll be asking just how bad things are likely to get across Europe this winter as the energy crisis hits the continent. And as always, we want to hear what you've got to say as well. Do tweet me at GBViews or GB News, or indeed email me at gbviews@gbnews.co.uk. As always, you can get in touch at any point. We'll get your emails a little later in the programme. But first, at the top of the hour, at 3 o'clock, let's bring you up to date with the very latest news headlines. And here goes the facts.
Good afternoon. It's just 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Well, fans have been gathering in Trafalgar Square for the Lionesses' historic Euro 2022 win celebration. It's England's first major championship win since the 1966 World Cup. England beat Germany 2-1 in extra time in front of a record crowd of over 87,000 fans at Wembley Stadium. The Minister for Sport, Nigel Huddleston, believes the UK has a great chance of hosting the Women's World Cup in 2027.
I can't speak on behalf of the Chancellor, but I think we could have a very compelling case. And of course, you know, we're bidding already. We've got a team in place to bid for the 2028 Euros and actually a whole host of other events later on this year as well. We've got the Rugby League World Cup, we've got international gymnastics, you know, and we're currently hosting, as I said, the Commonwealth Games. So we punch above our weight in major international sporting events, but we can do even more.
A virtual Court of Appeal hearing is underway to hear the life support treatment case of Archie Battersby. The government referred the case back to the courts for urgent consideration following an intervention by the UN. 12-year-old Archie is in a coma after suffering brain damage. Barts Health NHS Trust said his treatment would end this afternoon after a High Court ruled it was in his best interests. Ballots for Conservative Party members to vote in the leadership contest will start arriving today. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will go head-to-head tonight in a hustings in Exeter as they head into a crucial week in the Tory leadership race. Both leadership candidates have made further policy announcements in a bid to shore up support. Liz Truss has vowed to remove EU regulations and red tape in an effort to improve the nation's food security. She's also promised to tackle staff shortages in farming with a short-term expansion to the seasonal workers scheme. The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Therese Coffey, is backing Liz Truss.
Well, I think it shows that colleagues recognise that Liz is ready to lead, is trusted to deliver and will get on with the job from day one. She's been consistent in her approach on reducing taxes for families and for businesses, and I think it's important that we get on with that, including the other policies she's announced today.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has committed to taking 4p off income tax within 7 years if he becomes Prime Minister. The former Chancellor said he has a plan to cut the basic rate from 20p in the pound to 16.
So on top of the plans I announced as Chancellor to get people £1,200 of help, now the bills are going to be higher than we thought. It's right that we go further. And as Prime Minister, what I want to do is cut VAT on energy bills to provide a little bit of extra help for people over the autumn and winter. But today I've been setting out my radical vision for where I want to take the economy after we get inflation under control. I want to cut income tax by 20%. That's one of the most far-reaching cuts to income tax that we've seen.
A 22-year-old man's been remanded into custody after being accused of murdering 9-year-old Lilia Valeo-Tete. She was found stabbed on a street in Boston last Thursday. Lithuanian national David Askebas was arrested after the public responded to CCTV images that were released to help trace him. He's appeared at Lincoln Magistrates Court this morning, charged with her murder, and will appear at Lincoln Crown Court later today. Ukraine's infrastructure minister says a ship that's carrying grain has left the port of Odessa for Lebanon under a safe passage agreement. It's the first vessel to depart as part of a deal to unblock Ukraine's Black Sea ports. The sailing was made possible after Turkey and the United Nations came to a grain and fertiliser export agreement between Russia and Ukraine last month. Ukraine's foreign minister called it a day of relief for the world. Political leaders and dignitaries have gathered in Lisbon, County Antrim, for the funeral of Lord David Trimble. The former Ulster Unionist Party leader and Nobel Prize winner died last week, aged 77, following an illness. Lord Trimble played a key role in forging the 1998 Good Friday Agreement that ended decades of conflict in Northern Ireland. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Darren.
Yes, it is 6 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Monday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your wireless radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. We're going to park politics for a couple of minutes because it's been 56 years, but at last the wait is over. England's Lionesses triumphed over Germany to win the Euros last night. It's been coming home for decades, but now it really is finally home. Let's go live to Paul Hawkins, who is in Trafalgar Square this afternoon, where They've been celebrating all day, Paul. What a day. Just take us through the last couple of hours with thousands have gathered in Trafalgar Square to help the team celebrate.
Yeah, Darren, good afternoon to you. 7,000 fans here earlier today, cheering, celebrating, singing. There was a lot of anticipation and build-up, and then the Lionesses appeared in a big grey coach, and then we knew they were here, but they were waiting backstage, and the anticipation built further, and there were more renditions of Sweet Caroline, and then eventually they came up on stage to a huge roar, a huge round of applause, and pretty much most of the squad and the manager, Serena Wiegmann, spoke. We heard from Beth Mead, the player of the tournament, the top scorer at the tournament. We heard from last night's goal scorers, Chloe Kelly and Ella Toone. We heard from Jill Scott, one of the more senior members of the England team. All of them talking about legacy, talking about how proud they were to play for England, talking about how hard it has been for women's football to come this far, and talking about how much they love their country. Really interesting from the manager as well, talking about how this wasn't just a great bunch of players, but also great human beings as well. Real connection with the crowd. There were renditions between the players and the crowd of Sweet Caroline, and the fans were absolutely loving it, as I found out afterwards.
Brilliant, we're so happy we got here. We're in London for 3 days and we got in, amazing.
And the atmosphere here is unreal. So we would have never have had this a few years ago.
Yeah.
And then just look at the chaos now, what it's causing. Everyone's come together to support our women, and what a good job they've done.
Did you ever see something like this with the women's football team?
No.
No?
No.
No?
No, this is the biggest stage they've ever had. And I'm just hoping, from what I've been hearing from Ian Wright,
yeah,
I'm just hoping that they make the tickets and the matches more accessible to the youngsters.
How have you found this?
Amazing, and they deserve the cup.
Yeah, who have you enjoyed watching the most? Who's your favourite player?
Russo, Russo.
Was it that back heel?
Yeah.
It was good, wasn't it?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And it went through her legs, it went through the goalkeeper's legs as well.
Yeah, yeah. And do you play yourself?
I'm about to play in September for Bromley.
For the first time? Do you want to play now because you've watched this England women's team?
Yeah.
Have you enjoyed watching the tournament?
Yes.
Yeah?
A lot.
Yeah, who's been your favourite player?
Ellen White.
Yeah.
Beth Mead.
Really?
Yeah.
Were they your favourite players before the tournament, or as watching the tournament made?
Always they have, because Beth Mead is such fast paced, she's a really good shooter, and I play in the same position as her.
Oh right, okay,
Yeah.
so you're playing already. Do you play as well?
No.
But would you like to play?
Yeah.
There you go, that's inspiration, Darren, in the flesh. Because of what she's watched at this Euros. The problem is the big secondary schools allow girls to play football as much as boys. That leaves 56% of schools where girls are going to go and say, hey, headmaster, I want to play football now. And the school's going to say, well, we haven't got a team. We need to get the resources, we need the coaches, we need to put in place the right pieces so that we can have a girls' football team and multiple girls' football teams at different levels, the same as the boys. So that's going to be the challenge for the authorities, the challenge for government now, to give schools the resources and the clubs the resources at grassroots level to build on this European Championship victory. In terms of where the team itself go next, World Cup qualifiers begin in September for Australia and New Zealand next year. That's when the World Cup is taking place. And then if we look ahead to 2027, the World Cup then, could England, could the UK put in a bid for that? The sports minister, who I spoke to earlier, Nigel Huddleston, said that the country had made a compelling case. So now it's about building on what's happened here.
Yeah, really good stuff, isn't it, Paul? Thank you. I'm just disappointed you weren't wearing your sunglasses during that live, given how glorious it is there, Trafalgar Square. Thank you very much indeed. Interestingly, Downing Street this afternoon having to insist that Boris Johnson is supportive of women's football, given the fact that he didn't attend last night's game, or the fact that the Lionesses haven't had a reception at number 10. They were insistent, though, the Prime Minister is very pleased with England's triumph in that game. Do get in touch about that and everything else. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let's turn to politics, though, because ballot papers have begun to land on Conservative members' doormats this morning. And as many are expected to vote straight away, these are crucial days for both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. Liz Truss is now, it seems, the runaway favourite with 5 weeks left to go. Can Rishi Sunak turn things around? Well, today he's been speaking to reporters in Dorset and was questioned on his, what he brands, radical tax announcement. Let's have a listen in.
Well, I've always said that we need to help people with the cost of living over this autumn and winter. So on top of the plans I announced as Chancellor to get people £1,200 of help, now that bills are going to be higher than we thought, it's right that we go further. And as Prime Minister, what I want to do is cut VAT on energy bills to provide a little bit of extra help for people over the autumn and winter. But today I've been setting out my radical vision for where I want to take the economy after we get inflation under control. I want to cut income tax by 20%. That's one of the most far-reaching cuts to income tax that we've seen. We'll do that responsibly over time, continuing to reduce our borrowing, and we'll do it by growing the economy, taking advantage of our Brexit freedoms and getting our businesses to invest more and innovate more through the tax reforms that I'm going to put in place. Well, you have to remember that actually in the parliamentary stage of this contest, I topped the ballot in each and every round with more support from MPs than any other candidate. And since the close of that ballot, we've had lots more people coming on board as well. So actually, I feel very confident that there's an enormous amount of support, in fact, the most support in the parliamentary party for my candidacy. But this is now about all our members. And that's why I'm going out around the country, here in the southwest, but absolutely everywhere, talking to members about my vision for the future, how we can put conservative values into action, reforming our public services, cutting taxes, growing the economy, tackling illegal migration, and crucially, who is best placed to win the next election against Keir Starmer. And that is a pitch that they're responding really positively to. Well, I think trust is really important and standards are really important in public life. I think honesty is important, and that's why in this leadership campaign, even though it's not easy for me, I want to be honest about some of the challenges we face and what it's going to be required to fix them. Now, in terms of restoring trust into public life, I would want to reappoint quickly an independent advisor to make sure that ministers in the government are held to account for their behaviour. That's something that's important to me, and I think the outside world needs to see that it's important to government. I will lead a government that does do exactly that.
That's Rishi Sunak speaking a little earlier down in Exeter, where the second official hustings from the Conservative Party will take place a little later on today between him and Liz Truss. Let's get more now from our political correspondent, Tom Holward, who joins me in the studio this afternoon. Hello, Tom. A crucial couple of days, isn't it, in the sense is the expectation that people will start to begin voting and begin pretty soon?
That's certainly the case, and that's why we've seen this flurry of announcements, really, from both candidates in recent days, and why Rishi Sunak, to some extent, is being accused of U-turning on this question of tax and spend by the Liz Truss campaign and her allies. Let's not forget that Rishi Sunak, at the start of this campaign, was saying that he was not going to engage in fairy tale economics, that he was going to say unpopular truths that would make him sound reasonable and steady when it comes to the public finances. Well, since we've had several opinion polls come out, several debate performances, a lot of data points showing that actually he's quite far behind Liz Truss when it comes to what the membership think, we've had a bit of a change in tone from Rishi Sunak. First, the announcement on VAT on fuel bills. That's a tax cut that he originally opposed in Parliament just a couple of months ago, stood at the dispatch box saying would be unfair, and he has claimed would similar things be inflationary. And now we have this announcement that he wants to cut income tax as well, quite considerably, but not completely for another 7 years. That's a point that Liz Truss has been attacking.
But in saying that, his argument is that he is being ideologically consistent here, or that he is at least being consistent in terms of his messaging, that he's always promised he was going to be a tax-cutting Chancellor, just didn't get round to it clearly, but that this is nothing new because these plans are so far into the future.
Yes, so his argument is, of course, that by the time that we get into the next Parliament, inflation will be down. However, that is a bit of a wing and a prayer because we don't know the level inflation will be at in 2024, 2025, 2026, and yet Rishi Sunak is spelling out the tax cuts that will happen in those years, which does seem to run a little bit contrary to his argument about inflation beforehand. But it's not just tax and spend that the candidates have been speaking about. Of course, it's the Southwest hustings this evening, and so we've been hearing a lot about agricultural policy. And very interestingly, Rishi Sunak has gone on the attack on the Liz Truss campaign for something that Liz Truss has said about farming and about seasonal work visas. Liz Truss has said that as Prime Minister, she would extend this temporary visa so that people can come over, pick the fruit and the like, so that that's sort of a sop to farmers in a way. Well, Rishi Sunak has come out with a very strong statement against that, saying that Liz Truss is blaming Brexit, saying that she's showing her true colours as a Remainer with this visa proposal. A really quite stinging response there. Now, I put that response to someone on Liz Truss's team who responded very simply with an animated picture of a car rearing around a slippery road, spinning and spinning. And it does seem that Liz Truss's team are confident that this attack from Rishi Sunak will not stick, not least because she has the backing of the European Research Group, of the strong Brexiteers in the Conservative Party, saying that actually Brexit means control of immigration, choosing who to come in and when, not the absolute.
And not least of all also because the farming community, and indeed I think one of Rishi Sunak's own backers, George Eustice, wants to see a change in terms of the numbers who are allowed in. Just very finally, Tom, though, clearly the momentum is with Liz Truss. And I say that just not looking at the polling numbers, but you can always judge these things by the number and the calibre of the people who decide to back the candidates. And we've heard from Brandon Lewis, the former Northern Ireland Secretary, in the last couple of days, Nadine Zahawi, the current Chancellor today, both rowing in behind Liz Truss.
And following Tom Tugendhat, of course, once a high-polling candidate for Prime Minister, someone who many people thought would row in behind Rishi Sunak. He's seen to be on the left of the party, but him backing Liz Truss, someone seen to be on the right of the party, does mean that there is this head of steam behind the Liz Truss campaign. And to put it in the words of the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, something he said in his resignation statement, when the herd moves, it moves. And it does seem that the herd in Westminster has decided that this is Liz Truss's race for the losing and is really moving in behind her now.
Oh, when the ambitious spot a winner, they all go in that direction. Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed. Tom Holward there, our political correspondent, live with us in the studio. OK, take a quick break on the briefing here on GB News. Coming up, we're going to be live in Northern Ireland at Lord David Trimble's funeral today, where Boris Johnson's been in attendance. Plus, we're going to be speaking to Sir John Curtis about those polling numbers, about the state of play in the Conservative leadership race, that and so much more in just a couple of minutes. First, here's the all-important weather from the Met Office. We're also down in Exeter.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry and bright out there for many of us this afternoon, but it is going to turn cloudy with rain for many, especially northern and central areas overnight. And it will stay, once again, driest towards the south. At the moment, an area of high pressure is stretching towards the UK from the southwest, but a number of weather fronts are coming in over the top of that high. They are now starting to bring rain to Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and overnight we'll see that rain spread into the rest of Scotland, northern England, parts of North and West Wales as well. The further south you are, the more that rain will be on and off and lighter. The far south and southeast tending to stay dry with some clear spells. But elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover, increasingly breezy, spells of rain and mild, 17 or 18 Celsius by dawn in many places. The rain, though, will be heavy at times for northern and western parts of the country as we start off Tuesday, particularly North Wales, North. Into the afternoon, the rain tends to ease. It stays cloudy and damp across Wales and the west of England. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, brighter skies. And here, 23, 24, 25 Celsius possible in places with that sunny shine. And towards the southeast, it stays dry and it's going to feel humid, although breezy, with highs of 29 or 30 Celsius. Into the evening, and outbreaks of rain continue across northern and western parts of the country, mostly light, showery stuff, and again it stays dry towards the southeast as well as parts of northern England and eastern Scotland. But it's another mild night with a keen is no lower than 19 Celsius. So we start off Wednesday with a lot of cloud cover, some heavier rain for a time, perhaps around the Bristol Channel area. That moves through, and it looks like it's going to be replaced by bright spells and showers for the rest of the week. The showers mostly affecting northern areas, largely dry to the south, and cooling off a little bit.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Now, it seems that almost with every metric, Liz Truss is the runaway favourite to be the next Conservative leader and, indeed, our Prime Minister. 160,000 or so Conservative members are going to decide in the days and weeks to come. But what does the general public think? And who do they prefer? And how might that new leader do in a general election against Sir Keir Starmer, for example? Well, there's no better person to tell us than the man himself, the guru of all of this, Sir John Curtis, who joins us down the line now. John, as always, thank you very much indeed for your time. Let's just start off with the Conservative leadership race. I said that pretty much every metric seems to suggest that Liz Truss is in the lead, and quite substantially. I assume you agree with that?
Not entirely, Darren. Well,
good.
What
Tell us
you have
why.
to bear in mind is that since Tory MPs decided that this was a contest between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, we have had one, I repeat, one opinion poll of the people who will actually have a vote. That is Conservative members. Now, sure, that poll put Liz Truss well ahead. Once you took out the 1 in 5 or so who didn't express a view, she was on 62%, well ahead of the 50% that's required. But that poll is now nearly a fortnight old. We've had a few other straws in the wind about the views of Tory members. One which came out yesterday in the Sun Telegraph, which was a poll of Conservative councillors, who of course are one section of the membership and perhaps a particular section of membership. But according to that poll, Rishi Sunak 31, Liz Truss 31, Rishi Sunak 29, over 30% saying they didn't know. Now, if indeed Liz Truss is meant to be a very long way ahead, that poll seemed at least to have a rather surprisingly narrow lead for Liz Truss. The other clue we've got, and it certainly doesn't negate the idea that Liz Truss is ahead, but if you actually look what happened when YouGov asked people which of the two did best in the BBC debate a week ago now, yes, Liz Truss was ahead, but she wasn't ahead by as much as she was in that original leadership poll. So I just simply say we perhaps don't know quite as much, quite as confidently as everybody is asserting, given particularly that the poll is now nearly 2 weeks old. But yes, Liz Truss is certainly the favourite, and I can certainly point you to some of the patterns in the polling about who backs Liz Truss as opposed to who backs Rishi Sunak, such as, for example, the fact that Liz Truss is the more popular amongst the Leave voters, Rishi Sunak amongst the Remain voters, but of course there are far more Leave voters than Remain voters amongst Conservative members. Equally, interestingly, according to the poll of Tory councillors yesterday, people who voted for Jeremy Hunt 3 years ago have Rishi Sunak ahead, whereas those who voted for Boris Johnson 3 years ago have Liz Truss ahead. And again, of course, the Boris Johnson camp is a much bigger one. So certainly if you look at the patterns of some of the voting, it certainly suggests that Liz Truss ought to be ahead. But let's just not overstretch ourselves in a race which certainly has seen some fairly radical and bold proposals made by both candidates, both of whom have been pretty much attacking each other pretty solidly over the last 2 weeks. We certainly don't know what impact, if any, that has had on the Tory membership as a whole.
Indeed, and also, John, we have to recognise that up until relatively recently, Liz Truss was pretty unknown. I mean, even among Conservative members.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And almost one of the things we've seen during the course of the full length of this Tory membership contest since the beginning of July is that, at the beginning, ask people who would make a good or a bad Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak tended to get relatively positive numbers. Liz Truss, A, a lot of don't knows, and B, tending to be negative. Now, certainly the greater exposure that she has got has meant, and as Tory members have warmed to her, as various of her competitors, such as Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, Penny Mordaunt dropped out. I think she's gradually benefited from that amongst the perceptions of the electorate, and that now there isn't a great deal in the polls, although still some tendency for the electorate in general to be more likely to regard Mr Sunak as likely to make a good Prime Minister than is the case for Liz Truss. And it's still the case that Liz Truss is somewhat the less well-known of the two, but certainly she's done an awful lot of catching up.
No, one of the arguments that Rishi Sunak's camp make in this is that they feel he would be more likely to win a general election, more likely to beat Keir Starmer. Is there any truth in that?
The honest truth is that it's, I think, for either camp to point to decisive polling evidence that their candidate will be more successful than their opponent at turning Conservative fortunes around. We had quite one example of this in another poll that came out yesterday by Focal Data for the Sunday Times. So asking people how they would vote at the moment with Boris Johnson as leader, we have an 8-point Labour lead according to this poll. Ask people how they would vote if Liz Truss was leader. Well, it's a 7-point lead. With Rishi Sunak, it's a 6-point lead. These are very small differences. And it's pretty consistent with other polling that, in truth, I don't think whoever they choose, Tory members should assume that the arrival of either Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss in 10 Downing Street on the 6th of September is going to result in a rapid improvement in the Conservative voting fortunes of the kind that certainly the arrival of Boris Johnson in July 2019 certainly did help to engender. Neither of these candidates has sufficient popularity amongst the general public for them to be clearly somebody who is more likely than the other to turn Tory fortunes around.
And just very finally, and quick if you can, John, let me put that the other way around then if I can, which is given the fact that these leader contenders are kind of, laying into each other. There's clearly divisions within the Conservative Party. You've got a man in number 10 who's about to resign. The very fact that Labour are only 6, 7, 8 points ahead, many are saying that's not good for Her Majesty's opposition at a time in which you would have thought they should be doing better.
Yeah, I think that comment is still entirely valid. We're still, yet again, there's another poll out today by Ipsos Mori from the Evening Standard. People just do not know what Sir Keir Starmer stands for, and that it's been very rare in this Parliament, whatever the circumstances, for the Labour Party to be doing much better than 40% in the polls. And that indeed is still roughly where they are at now. So far, at least, Sir Keir Starmer has not demonstrated an ability to break consistently above that level.
OK, so John Curtis, as always, an absolute pleasure, live there from Glasgow this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, John. Thank you. OK, we're going to pause there on the briefing on GB News. Coming up, we're going to be live in Northern Ireland for the latest on Lord Trimble's funeral in Germany as it faces a gas crisis. Plus, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, we'll have the latest on the heartbreaking time for the family of Archie Battersea. They are waiting for the last-minute appeal, which we're expecting any minute. The decision on that, we'll bring you that, of course, live. But before all of that, let's bring you up to date with the very latest news headlines. And it's back to Rosa White.
A very good afternoon to you. It is 3:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Well, fans gathered this afternoon at Trafalgar Square for the Lionesses' historic Euro win, 2022 champions, and a party to celebrate. It's England's first major championship win since the 1966 World Cup, beating Germany 2-1 in extra time. A record crowd of over 87,000 fans came to Wembley Stadium to watch, whilst over 17.4 million of us tuned in to watch from home. Minister for Sport Nigel Huddleston believes the UK has a great chance of hosting the Women's World Cup in 2027.
I speak on behalf of the Chancellor, but I think we could have a very compelling case. And of course, we're bidding already. We've got a team in place to bid for the 2028 Euros and actually a whole host of other events later on this year as well. We've got the Rugby League World Cup, we've got international gymnastics, and we're currently hosting, as I said, the Commonwealth Games. So we punch above our weight in major international sporting events, but we can do even more.
Ukraine says the first ship carrying grain has left the port of Odessa as part of a deal to unblock Ukraine's Black Sea ports. It was made possible after Turkey and the United Nations came to a grain and fertiliser export agreement between Russia and Ukraine last month. Well, meanwhile, Russia has banned entry to 39 officials from the UK, including the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and the former Prime Minister David Cameron. A virtual Court of Appeal hearing is underway to hear the life support treatment case of Archie Battersby. The government referred the case back to the courts for urgent consideration following an intervention by the UN. 12-year-old Archie is in a coma after suffering brain damage. Barts Health NHS Trust said his treatment would end this afternoon after a High Court ruled that was in Archie's best interests. Political leaders and dignitaries have gathered in Lisbon, County Antrim, for the funeral of Lord David Trimble. The former Ulster Unionist Party leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner died last week, aged 77, following an illness. Lord Trimble played a key role in forging the 1998 Good Friday Agreement that ended decades of conflict in Northern Ireland. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.226 to the dollar and 1.195 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,443.40 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harward and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harward, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harward, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Very welcome back to The Briefing here on GB News. It is 22 minutes to the top of the hour on this Monday afternoon. We're on TV, online, of course, on your digital radio as well. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Do get in touch, by the way, GBViews at gbnews.uk, or indeed tweet us at GB News. Now, let's return to our top story today. That is England, of course, his big victory over Germany in the Euros last night. Football has come home, and it is the ladies who have brought it home. Well, joining me now is Janie Frampton. She is a former referee and FIFA instructor. Janie, thank you so much indeed for joining us. I'm sure you are just about recovering after last night's victory. Pretty incredible, wasn't it?
Totally amazing. I'm not even sure where recovery comes in. I walk around with this ridiculous grin on my face ever since the final whistle last night. It's just phenomenal.
And record-breaking as well. You know, this is the first time that England have managed to win a major tournament since 1966. And it is also the most attended football tournament final of the Euros that we've ever seen.
Yes, and you know what? I expected the latter to be the case because it's growing. Women's football is growing so rapidly that people are taking far more interest in it. And, you know, I keep saying this to people. In 1966, when the men last won a major tournament, women were banned from playing football. And I was explaining this to my daughter this morning, that it was only as recent as 1974 when a volunteer group set up the Women's Football Association. And only 1994 when the FA took it over. So that is phenomenal strides in that short space of time.
Yeah, really incredible. And also, I think the 10 years ago, only 1.4 million people watched the Euros final when it was on. And yet it was, a peak of 17 million last night. Why do you think it has changed so much? What has happened in particularly the last decade or so, where support has grown to pretty incredible levels?
It is. And, you know, it is down to the investment by the FA for sure. And the drive by really key people at the FA. Baroness Sue Campbell, Kelly Simmons. But let's not forget how Hope Powell put this whole process in place for the 15 years that she was at Wembley as head of women's football. But I do think also the Women's Super League has made a huge difference because it's professionalised the women's game. And that's what we're now seeing is the outcome of that professionalisation, where the girls, you know, in the Women's Super League are now professional players rather than doing a main job and football being just their hobby they're doing on the side.
And we all hope, of course, this is going to inspire millions of girls across the UK who may well now take up football. But there is still a long way to go, isn't there? And it's not just in football, in other sports as well. But there is talk about potentially England bidding to host the Women's World Cup in the future too.
You see, that would be super. I do believe this has been a catalyst now, particularly in this country, for other sports national governing bodies just to take a look and see how they can start promoting their women's sport better in those very male-dominated sports. This shows it can be done, and it can show the rewards you can reap if you do it well.
And just very finally, what role, though, do schools have to play in this? Because, again, I was hearing today that I think it's a third, maybe going up to, or maybe around 40% of schools don't have women's or girls' football at school. Again, you know, there is a need for change, isn't there? Do you think that will come now?
I do. And, you know, I think there's two parts to that in the way of an answer. One is primary schools. There's a high percentage of teachers in primary schools are women, and many of them have not been trained to teach football in any shape or form, and they're sometimes afraid to attack it. And actually, it's very, very easy just to give it a go. And I think also then we come to the secondary schools where they need to put this on the curriculum, that it's not hockey for girls and football for boys. It can be hockey for both, football for both. And we need to start breaking down those barriers of what the curriculum thinks is suitable for different genders.
Yeah, really great stuff. Well, I hope the recovery goes well, and indeed the continued celebrations. Janie, thank you very much indeed for your time. That's Janie Frampton there, former referee and FIFA instructor, joining us down the line. Now, the German city of Hanover has had to cut off hot water in public buildings, swimming pools, sports halls and gyms as Russia cuts, of course, gas supplies, and there are fears that it could get worse this winter. The city will also switch off public fountains and stop lighting up large buildings at night as it aims to reduce its energy consumption by around 15%. EU leaders have accused the Kremlin of using the state-owned Gazprom as a weapon in retaliation for Western sanctions over Russia's war in Ukraine. Well, what could this extraordinary measure mean for the rest of Germany and indeed for the EU, or indeed us here at home? Let's go to Berlin, speak to the journalist Thomas Barrow, who joins us from there. Thomas, good afternoon. Just talk us through what Hanover, that city, is doing, and I suspect we may well see in other German cities pretty soon.
You're actually already seeing that in other German cities. Only last week, for example, Berlin, the capital, announced that it was going to stop illuminating around 200 public buildings and monuments, some of the country's best-known landmarks, in order to save energy. Munich in the south has also announced similar measures. You mentioned already what Hanover is doing, and these are only 3 examples. Several other cities have announced their own measures. They're discussing, for example, whether to turn temporarily traffic lights off. They're discussing whether to reduce heating when it comes to the winter months. They're discussing all sorts of measures as part of what has been described as a coordinated nationwide effort to save energy in light of Russia's reduced gas supplies to Germany via Nord Stream 1.
And I also read today that they're fueling back up some coal stations as well to try and offset the diminishing gas supplies. And still there's continued debate about the use of nuclear power.
And you can imagine just how controversial that is here in Germany. The government, and an important member of the government is the Green Party, the environmentalist Green Party. Germany has actually climate goals that have been described as very ambitious. And now, because of this energy crisis, they're not only restarting the use of coal-powered plants, they're also discussing whether to use the remaining 3 nuclear power plants as well to diversify energy sources. Here in Germany, not many believe that nuclear power is actually a green alternative to fossil fuels. So as such, there are big questions as to whether this would affect Germany's ambitious climate goals. The German Chancellor repeatedly has stressed that these measures are only temporary in nature and that they will not affect Germany's climate goals. But there are obviously concerns. This is something very, very important that the German government has decided and is discussing. And as such, it is something that will probably also have an impact on the medium to long term.
Thomas, there was discussion here in the UK over the weekend about those rising energy prices here and the possibility of civil unrest, given the impact they could have. Has that discussion, is that concern in existence in Germany and indeed other parts of Europe, that as we get into the winter, as things really begin to bite, that actually people may well take to the streets?
That is absolutely a discussion here in Germany that has been mentioned as a main concern also that the government has, that this is not only something that will have a political or an economic impact, in particular if Russia cuts off entirely its supplies to Germany, it could also have a very significant social impact. It could widen the gap between rich and poor. It could make gas, for example, a luxury, something that obviously, or heating a luxury, something that Germans obviously do not want. There are concerns that loads of people here could not have enough money to pay for their heating and for their gas bills, and as such, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz recently came back from his holidays. He interrupted his holidays, gave a press statement here in Berlin, and actually used a phrase in English to mention how he and the rest of the government is going to help, especially those who are affected. He said, "You'll never walk alone," using that famous phrase made famous by Jerry and the Pacemakers, and which you hear in stadiums, especially in Liverpool, but also in other parts of the world as well. He said, "You'll never walk alone," basically telling Germans that whatever needs to be done, the government will try and help in order to prevent these social problems from happening, in order to help people who will not be able to afford the hundreds or thousands of euros even that they may have to pay in extra energy costs if this situation continues to worsen.
OK, Thomas, as always, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thomas Barrow there, live for us in Berlin this afternoon. OK, let's effectively end the programme in many ways by talking about Lord David Trimble, because he was laid to rest today in Northern Ireland, of course played a vital role in bringing peace to the province there through the Good Friday agreements. Well, attending that funeral was our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, who is in Lisbon for us this afternoon. Dougie, the Irish President and Prime Minister were there, alongside Boris Johnson as well, and the political leaders from across Northern Ireland.
They were paying respects to a man whose legacy has been 25 years of peace in Northern Ireland. Together with John Hume, they were the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, and it could tell. If anything is said about a legacy here today, I looked around me and I thought, well, what is the difference? Well, if you look today, the press were allowed this close to a visiting Prime Minister. The police were here, were saluting the coffin as it came by, as opposed to standing there armed to the teeth as it would have been 25 years ago. And a cordon thrown round here and a helicopter overhead. None of that was here, because we've had those 25 years of peace in Northern Ireland. Lambeg here is a suburb of Lisburn. Anybody that's in the armed forces will know this place extremely well. The head of the British Army's land forces in Northern Ireland is just about a mile away in Thethel Barracks. And the current leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, an ex-military man himself and a namesake of mine, Captain Douglas Beattie, spoke to us just a short while ago.
It really is a sad day to say farewell to Lord David Trimble, who is a giant in Northern Ireland politics, a man of vision, a man of courage, a man who took decisions when they were difficult decisions to take, and people are alive today because of them. It is a shame at times that we talk about people like this in death, when it would be so much nicer if we were able to talk about this vision that he had in life. But it's also worth remembering that today there was a moving ceremony for the family to say goodbye, because of all else, David Trimble was a husband, a father, a grandfather and a brother, and we have to remember that human side of him and that frailty in a man that we all have in ourselves. The place will be a lesser place for David's passing. I'm very proud to be the Ulster Party leader, Ulster Unionist Party leader. I'm very proud to walk in the footsteps of people like David Trimble, but I can never emulate what he achieved. All I can do is take his legacy, which is easy to quantify. It is peace in Northern Ireland. It is a less divided, less sectarian society, and try to push that on as best we can and make those difficult decisions. We're sorry for his loss, but we'll remember his legacy in the many, many months and years to come.
Well, you could hear that in the current leader of the Ulster Unionist Party's voice. He has an uphill climb ahead of him. Of course, when David Trimble took power in 1995 from Jim Molyneux, he went into those talks. He did split his party. The right wing went to the DUP, which caused the Ulster Unionist Party to suffer massive electoral defeat and bring the SDLP with it. A final note on today, I suppose, is I was quite sad at the start to see how little of Joe Public had turned out to say goodbye to this man, and then part of me thought, Well, isn't it lovely that most of the people here were over 50? So that means that those under that age would never have remembered the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And it's because of men like David Trimble and John Hume that has came about.
Indeed, fine words. Dougie Beattie, live there for us in Lisbon. Thank you this afternoon at the funeral there of Lord David Trimble. Colin Brazier, who's on air in just a couple of minutes' time, 4 to 6, is with me in the studio. Just a reflection on that, isn't it interesting that in many ways, even the people of Northern Ireland are taking that peace for granted?
Wasn't it a good point by Dougie at the end there, I thought he made? I mean, it was one of those politicians, Trimble, who you looked at and the probity, the integrity, the decency sort of came through every pore, didn't they? I mean, he was a politician cut from a slightly different cloth, but as you indicated, and Dougie too, there's a generation of politicians who are leaving the stage in Northern Ireland now, and they belong to that era of the Troubles. The new generation, yes, they nod to the Troubles, but they have other things to deal with, don't they?
Yeah, they do indeed. And in talking about a new generation of politicians, we're going to have a new Prime Minister Boris Johnson was at that funeral, but we're going to have a new Prime Minister in, 5 weeks' time? But it's these days that could be crucial because the Conservative membership are getting the ballots.
Well, today especially. And I'm really interested to dig into what Liz Truss is saying to farmers. Look, here's a question I don't know the answer to it, and I doubt you do either. Does anybody? How many Conservative Party members are farmers?
Yes.
I think the population...
Or no farmers.
Well, the population who employed in agriculture in the UK is less than 1%. I imagine of those 160,000 Conservative Party members who will choose the next Prime Minister, the number of people working in agriculture, and indeed farmers, will be significantly higher. So actually talking to them with policies, and genuine policies at that, worth doing.
And isn't it really fascinating, this debate about immigration and about people coming in to pick fruit, essentially, and vegetables for farmers? Farmers have been talking about wanting to see this for the last year or two, saying we cannot. Food is literally rotting in our fields because there's no one to pick it. And yet, as someone who has kind of been the most Brexity of the two candidates, but also voted Remain, is the person saying, you know what, actually we will solve this in a limited way with migration.
And the person who secured the trade deal with Australia. And we've got Jamie Blackett coming on, who farms in the borders. And he was a Remainer, but he feels that trade deal with Australia, brokered by Liz Truss, is actually to the betterment of farmers. There are opportunities now opening up to British farmers, which he feels need to be taken advantage of. Can I mention the bagpiper?
You can, yeah. You've got
a bagpiper live in the studio. That'll end really well.
Bagpiper live in the studio? OK. Don't work with children, dogs, or live musical instruments, particularly from Scotland. Colin will be tuning in just a couple of minutes' time from 4 o'clock. Just let's end with some of your reviews. Lots of you getting in touch. Davey says, Darren, Sunak has not outlined how he intends to bring inflation under control. The man has no idea, no new ideas, and is a Blair clone. Nick says, don't let Sunak anywhere number 10. We're in a massive debt crisis, the highest inflation for 40 years. This is all the damage that he's caused. Brian says, Sunak is a backstabber and cannot be trusted. And Ian says, I view Rishi Sunak and Meghan Markle in the same way. I simply don't believe a word they say. I think it's fair to say that some of our viewers, at least, are not massively in favour of Rishi Sunak. But do always get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk, or indeed tweet us at GBNews. Welcome all views here on the channel. OK, that is it from me for today. Of course, Tom Holward will be here at 9:30 in the morning. I'll be back at 3 tomorrow afternoon. But we will leave you with Colin Brazier, who's on air, as I said, a couple of minutes between 4 and 6. That's after this afternoon's weather. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a nice afternoon.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry and bright out there for many of us this afternoon, but it is going to turn cloudy with rain for many, especially northern and central areas overnight. And it will stay, once again, driest towards the south. At the moment, an area of high pressure is stretching towards the UK from the southwest, but a number of weather fronts are coming in over the top of that high. They are now starting to bring rain to Northern Ireland, western Scotland, and overnight we'll see that rain spread into the rest of Scotland, northern England, parts of North and West Wales as well. Further south you are, the more that rain will be on and off and lighter. The far south and southeast tending to stay dry with some clear spells. But elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover, increasingly breezy, spells of rain and mild. 17 rain.